This is not the video that I thought I would be making today. Hence, our gameplay today is not really Arizona Coyotes related. I don't even know what's going to be in the background. It could be some, I don't know, Swedish Hockey League? Let's see what happens. But this is a weird story. This is not what I thought I would need to talk about today, but I read about this earlier and I realized that nobody has actually covered this online. No one has posted about this on Reddit, no one is talking about this on Twitter, nobody has made any YouTube videos that I have seen, but the magnitude of this story is so vast that I think it does deserve its own topic. Let's talk about the Arizona Coyotes and recruiting. Yeah, that's right. The title says it all. The Arizona Coyotes are under investigation for alleged recruiting violations. Now, just in case you didn't know, recruiting is defined in sports as the process in which a team adds prospective athletes to their roster. Now, that's not necessarily something that NHL teams are able to do because in this context, we're talking about recruiting draft-eligible CHL players. Let's go over onto TSN's most recent insider trading article because oddly enough, they actually talk about this here. Interesting development inside the NHL, it looks like the league may be investigating the Coyotes for alleged recruiting violations. It's an ongoing NHL investigation into allegations that Arizona allegedly has been fitness testing draft-eligible CHL players. Now, in the OHL, the WHL, and the QMJHL, they all sent out emails to their respective junior teams asking if any contact with the Arizona Coyotes has been reported. According to sources, multiple teams have returned to say yes, there indeed has been contact with the Coyotes. So what does that mean? That means the Arizona Coyotes have been going out there allegedly and have been contacting CHL teams from around the country and asking them, hey, your players, can we fitness test them? Can we do our measurements on them? Can we do all this stuff that usually goes on at the Combine before the Combine? Now, I'm not necessarily too sure just from reading this article whether or not that's actually gone through and whether or not these teams were like, okay, here you go, here's our player, but just based off of what we've just read, it seems like contact has indeed been established, according to sources. It's clearly defined by the NHL that there cannot be any physical testing before the Combine. If guilt is established, and again, it's an ongoing investigation, the Coyotes could face substantial fines, $250,000 or more per incident, at the discretion of NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman. So, let's say the Coyotes, they tested out 5 players. Well, all of a sudden, it's a minimum fine of about $1.25 million. That's an entire bottom 6 player right there. Now, I don't know how much budget NHL teams have to spend. I know it's different how much teams actually own and how much teams have available to use under the salary cap, but seeing as the fines could get upwards of $1 million plus, depending on how many players they did indeed interview, allegedly speaking, of course, it's actually crazy. Have we ever seen fines in the NHL that have been this big to such a big entity? We've seen players, we've seen coaches, we've seen individual parties get fined before, but tell me the last time a big entire team has been under flame for something like this. Now, it's actually really weird. If we scroll down to the very end of the insider trading article, let's read this here. It looks like there might be an age change moving forward when it comes to recruiting players. There's lobbying that's going around about the minimum age requirement. Some top player agents are lobbying the NHL's Player Association to follow the model that is in place in Sweden. Today, you can't approach a player before his 16th birth year, and top player agents in North America want to embrace a similar model because of the bird dogs out there around the minor hockey rinks that are approaching these kids or their families at age 12 or 13. And most of us wouldn't like that. Now, I don't know if they're talking about NHL teams or the Coyotes specifically, or maybe this is minor hockey recruiting, because when it comes to the differences in recruiting between NHL teams and minor hockey teams, aka the CHL, it's very obvious to see the differences. CHL players can start as early as 16 years of age, so it would make sense that they would be at the rinks for 12, 13, 14-year-olds asking to get their services. Obviously, there's something that feels wrong about that, but it doesn't surprise me that that's the process that would go on. Now, as for the Coyotes, it's actually really interesting to think about it like that, because the Coyotes staff hasn't necessarily been the most fluid? Nah, that's the wrong word. They haven't been the most aligned with the common belief, I would say. And that's something that has shown itself off over the past few years. Last year, the Arizona Coyotes drafted Victor Soderstrom 11th overall. They traded up to get him. And that was an interesting spot for him to be drafted. It's somewhere where I was not surprised to see him drafted, and he's looking really good today. But back then, the Coyotes said that they had Victor Soderstrom 3rd on their draft board, behind Jack Hughes and Capo Caco. That, to me, is something that I thought was really interesting. 2 years ago, they drafted Barrett Hayton 5th overall, when Hayton was expected to go much later than that. Arizona has been in a weird spot where their scouting hasn't really been aligned with the common belief. So, it's only even more weirder to me to see that the team that gets called out for potentially recruiting CHL players and physical testing them before they're allowed to do so is the Arizona Coyotes. Again, that's not to throw any shade or whatever, that's just throwing out my observations and what I think about these teams. Here's an article from yesterday. This is from azcentral.com, so arizonacentral.com. This was an article about the investigation where they actually released their statement. This is their statement right here. We are aware of the reports. We have discussed the matter with the NHL, and we will have no further comment at this time. The NHL also did not respond to a request for a comment when this article was published. The rest of the article goes over the same things that we talked about in the TSN Insider Trading article, but still, man, this is weird. Really weird situation at their hands over here. It's actually kind of interesting because I'm taking a look at it now. The Arizona Coyotes are in a spot where I don't really know how good their draft stock is going to be. The Coyotes right now are tied with the Oilers for the final spot in the Pacific Division, but because of tiebreakers, Arizona is all the way down there in the wild card. They're in the wild card, so is Vegas. So it's really interesting to take a look at how they're actually going about this, because if they're out there scouting players when they're still in a position to make the playoffs, one could only think that the Coyotes are out there trying to scout whatever players would be available in the 15, 16, 17, 20 plus mark in the NHL draft. If they're going over CHL prospects, guys who are in the OHL, the WHL, or the QMJHL, it would make sense if they were going after, I don't know, a Connor Zary, Justin Barron, a Jack Quinn, guys like Jacob Perreault, Seth Jarvis, Jeremy Poirier. Some of these guys would be available in that spot. So, just taking a look at the rankings of the draft and everything, there are indeed a few players that we can kind of align to see whether or not the Coyotes would have them on their radar, I guess. And hey, if the Coyotes are out there asking for the big fish, like the Byfields and the Lafrenières and whatever, I think we might hear a little bit more about that, since those guys have a lot more star power than the first crop of names that we mentioned. Not that they're significantly better players, it's just that they have more attention to them. So overall, it's a weird situation. Comment down below what you think about the Coyotes potentially going after CHL guys before they're allowed to. Hope you enjoyed this quick little video. Social that and bye.